Episode 4 of The Penguin has just been released, and following on from its stylistic approach that it's given us in the first 3 installments, this episode did the exact same. With an episode that was solely focused on Sofia Falcone, the relationship that she had with her family, her father, and how she ended up inside of Arkham for a decade. The ending of this episode essentially made her realize that she was going to become the very person that everybody actually saw her as. So with that, let's jump into the video and break down all that there was to take away from the episode. Here is The Penguin Episode 4 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The Ending Explained. The ending of this episode was something that tied back into the start of it, where Carmine Falcone essentially said to Sofia that one day all of what was his in the Falcone Empire would be hers, and she'd one day be head of the family. 10 years later, she pretty much got what she always wanted and was promised, even if it was in a way that she wouldn't have imagined back then. The final thing that we saw in the episode was her walking through the house in the present day in a gas mask, and us finding out that she released a poisonous gas into the air vent so that the entirety of the family, other than Johnny and Carla's daughter Gia, ended up dying. Sofia spent the night with Gia in the greenhouse to keep her away from the gas, and I think she did that for a couple of different reasons. The first is because I think she saw a part of herself in Gia, and she didn't want her to have to see her mother in a deceased state like she had to when she saw her own mother around the same age. And also because, as we heard, it was a place where Sofia and her brother Alberto used to spend a lot of time together when they were younger. So in a way, it almost allowed her to be close to him at that moment. This episode really leaned into why Sofia and Alberto were so close. He was the only person that stood by her when she truly needed support, and he fought for her to get out of Arkham, something that nobody else in the family did. Ever since we saw Sofia out of Arkham in the first episode, she had faced backlash for being released and being accused of being the Hangman and murdering 7 women. When in reality, it wasn't her, it was her father, and he got her sent to Arkham in order to take the blame away from him. As at that point, he was being investigated for murder, and she was seen as a rat for speaking with a journalist about the case that she was looking into. So he no longer trusted his daughter, so he wanted her out of the picture. Sofia faced judgment when she was inside of Arkham by the other patients there, as they were all female. The doctors who were trying to get a confession out of her also judged her too, and even the public when she was released. So at the end of the episode, after realizing that she couldn't trust her family as they all turned on her, and she couldn't trust Oz as he abandoned her when the Maronis held them at gunpoint and also found out that he was responsible for her brother's death, she knew that it was now time to trust the only person that she could. That was herself, because she had never let herself down before. She essentially became the very person that everybody viewed her as, this ruthless, psychotic killer, and that's what she became. All the people that didn't stand by her side when she was inside of Arkham and were alongside Carmine in signing the papers that said that she was mentally unstable, they were killed at the hands of her, and in her own words, they got what they deserved. She toasted to new beginnings and said to Dr. Rush that the world was a sick place and she was ready for a new start, and this was exactly that. She was now going to be leading the Falcone Empire, despite the fact that there was nobody else involved in it. The only person that she kept alive in the house was Johnny. I feel she kept Johnny alive because she knows that she can essentially mold him into how she wants him to be. He's the man with the information that she currently knows nothing about when it comes to the Empire, so I think she's just going to get the information out of him and then maybe kill him. The way that she spoke to him at the dinner table showed how she truly felt about him, so that's something I imagine we're going to see when the next episode develops. An insight into Sofia and Oz's relationship. One thing that this episode gave us that we hadn't really seen before was a real deep dive and insight into Oz and Sofia's relationship from 10 years ago. We found out in the previous episode that Oz used to be her driver and there was a power dynamic that was at play in the present day when they were working on rolling out Bliss, but this episode showed just how close the both of them used to be. Sofia said phrases such as "you deserve better" to Oz when he was talking about only being her driver, and she also told her brother to not call him the Penguin because it was an insult. She had a sense of care for Oz in a way that we hadn't seen at all in the show so far. However, there were still moments where she would express the power that she had, and although not deliberately, she made Oz feel small, which most likely contributed to him going to Carmine about her meeting the journalist, because that was his opportunity to get a leg up. She would say things like, "Oz, what are you doing inside?" implying that he wasn't good enough to be in the room with the family and calling out the fact that he bought a new jacket to look better. Plus, she'd also say, "Oz, you're only my driver, and that is all you are." We've seen throughout the show so far that Oz had an inferiority complex and that he was always driving to be more. And by going to Carmine about Sofia, it did give him that boost that he needed, and as Sofia said, it ultimately allowed him to be seen. But it came at the cost of his relationship that he had with her. This was why there was such a lack of trust in the present day between Sofia and him, because if it wasn't for Oz, then she would have never ended up inside of Arkham. And just like 10 years ago, Oz did the same thing in leaving Sofia when we saw the events of the ending of episode 2 from their perspective at the start of this episode, where she found out that Alberto was killed by Oz. Oz is fighting a battle on multiple fronts, and with Sofia most likely gunning for blood because her brother was the only real person that she cared about, and Oz took him away from her. He's going to have to now watch his back even more, especially now that she's got an actual taste for blood. My review of the episode. I thought this was a really good episode of the show. I didn't expect to have an episode that contained a backstory to Sofia, but I'm so glad that we got one. There's been a lot of mystery around the character, and this provided a lot of clarity, needed clarity as to why she's like the way that she is in the present day. Seeing that she was thrown inside of Arkham for a decade, not given a trial, and was essentially tortured because she wouldn't admit to killing 7 women that she believed that her father killed, whilst also witnessing her slowly being broken over time, it provided a great backstory to the character that was calmingly insane in the present day and had an edge to her. This episode made you actually feel bad for the character. Seeing how composed she was right at the beginning of the flashback, how organized and how intrigued she was to find out about the deaths that were there. You could see that she had a conscience there, but at the end, we saw what 10 years inside of Arkham does to a person, and a lifetime of being betrayed, especially when that's how people view you. When she was first going through the shock therapy, the score in the background of that scene perfectly suited it. It was uncomfortable to listen to, it matched the visuals, and it showed the horror that was on the horizon for the character. She became a shell of who she was at the beginning, and the transformation was just great. Cristin Milioti is really showing her range in this show, and this episode was solely carried by her. She made us feel for a character that prior to this episode came across as a psychotic individual that you believed was guilty of being the Hangman, but this changed my mind completely. She was a young woman that was still mourning her mother and was fearful because she worried that her father was responsible for the death. Do I think this is the best episode in the season so far? I don't think so. I've seen some people say that it is, but I preferred episode 3 to this one. Episode 3 was a standout one, and it had the creativity that was in this, but it was just more engaging. The Penguin is genuinely shaping up to be one of the best shows on TV right now. Colin Farell was barely even in this episode, and it still thrived, so it shows that the universe and story that they've created has legs, and it's able to stand on its own not only without the inclusion of Batman, but also without the need of the main character dominating it. It's impressive. So, there you have it, The Penguin Episode 4 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on The Penguin, then click on the card in the top corner, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.